people, sales, marketing team members. It's the same, helping to translate data to the business. And according to this, I like to spend time with those team mates or colleagues, those who really need help with data, like the guys and girls who prefer a little bit of chat instead of just receiving a pivot table. I'm pretty sure that you know all of them. I'm also the creator of Bilingual Analytics. Make sure to follow me on socials. And as you can probably already hear, I'm also bilingual. So that's the reason why it's called Bilingual Analytics. And back in 2020, beginning of 2021, I had a newfound love, and that's the reason why I put that asterisk, because it's no longer newfound, but it's still new, relatively new. And it's Dataflow. Something that before I started using Dataflow, I never really imagined it's possible to do with data, and especially in a business environment. Like, once again, we're not talking about data warehouse teams and all of that. Talking about a business analyst, someone who works, or financial analyst, someone who works closely with the business. Now, this data flow that we're going to talk about, essentially a business need-driven ETL. And we're talking about, in a sense, a data warehouse. And probably every single one of you who work for a company know how important it is to have a real single source of truth when it comes to analytics. I think most of the time where analytics falls short is because of the data that we use. Whether we use old data, crappy data, or just in general, the data is not user-friendly. Hence, business users are not using that properly. So what is a data flow? Let's start with the Microsoft definition. A data flow is a collection of tables that are created and managed in workspaces in the Power BI service. Now, this is really dry. I don't want you to read all the other bits. You probably saw in the service, when you click on the new button, the option to create a data flow. And once you click on that data flow button, you saw this gray background and stuff like define new tables, link tables from other data flows, import model, or even this attach a CDM folder. Like, honestly, if you are not an IT professional, these are probably really scary to click on. But today we are going to debunk that myth, and I'm going to help you to understand why it's critical to start working with data flows. So in layman terms, data flows are essentially, or data flow is Power Query Online. It helps you to connect to different data sources. It helps you to transform your data, whether it's adding, removing columns, pivoting, unpivoting details, getting files from a folder and transforming them to a structure that makes sense to the business. And it helps you and allows you to use that data, use data flow as a source in a Power BI report in Power BI desktop. And there are a few other cool stuff that you can do with data flows. Some I'm going to cover, some are probably a little bit more detailed than a one-on-one session. And as always, because it's a Microsoft Power BI product, some features are going to be premium only. So you have to pay for the big bucks to get those features. Some are a bit strange why Microsoft decided to have certain features as premium. But who are we to judge? It's up to them to decide which one is going to be a premium feature. You can also use a gateway to connect to on-prem data. And one of the most important bits about data flow that I personally love as a report creator, as an analyst, if you do this properly, your reports could potentially be a fully cloud-based solution, meaning that you no longer have to use probably, I'm just saying probably, a VPN. You no longer need to wait for a really slow local network drive to pick up the data from. Everything is going to be in the cloud, and you can work on your reports wherever, whenever you want to. obviously as long as you have a proper internet connection, but given that we live in the 21st century, we probably have a reliable internet connection anyway. And before I start talking about the project background, I'm just going to pause for a second and ask if there are any questions. I take that as a no. 1, 2, 3, no. All right, so the project background. In late 2020, I started working on a project, but essentially we had to change the scheduling and all of that bits and pieces. And probably all of you been there before. And essentially I had no time to update the report. So we had the structure, we had, I would say 70% of the report ready, but I had no time to refresh it on a monthly basis, weekly basis, and never really spent time updating that report. The business, one side of the business who had that information, who had that data, they were begging us to spend more time on that, work with that data, because it was gold to them, pure gold. But once again, we didn't have time, I didn't have time, none of the team members had time to refresh it. So we were just simply told them, guys, it's not really possible from our perspective. But you know what? If it is so important to you, why don't you do it yourself? And I would challenge every single one of you on this call. Ask that question from your business users. Why don't you do it yourself? Guess what? There is, 1 second. Their answer was, sure, we can do that. Just give us an easy user interface to work with, and we will be able to do that. And obviously some automated processes at the back end. Essentially, it was all about third-party data. We received some data from our distributors in Excel files. Every single one of them was in slightly different formats, but the data model itself was super simple. All the files that we received, whether it was via email or a business-to-business channel, was something that we could move to OneDrive or SharePoint Online. Essentially, excuse me. Now, this is just something from last week. I'm not used to this European weather anymore. I'm a weak Aussie. So essentially, all the data that we had, we could push everything to the cloud, to OneDrive. Once again, making the whole solution a cloud-based solution. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to create a data flow that will pick up files from a OneDrive folder. We are going to use multiple queries in the data flow and build a report. We are going to publish that report online. We're going to add new data to the fact table, and we are going to refresh that report in the service without opening Power BI Desktop. Now, I'm only going to use dummy data, really small subset of just dummy data. So don't worry about that, but look at the concept. Try to understand what's happening here, and you will be able to replicate this in your life. And as I said, it's time for a live demo. But before I do that, any questions? That's okay. So here we are. It is a Dataflow 101 workspace. And as I said, we click on this new button and start with a data flow. We have 4 different options: define table, linking data flows, importing a model, or just using a CDM folder to get data into this Dataflow. Every single time when you start with Dataflow 101, I'm still talking about this beginner-friendly version, I would suggest starting from this define new tables. Once we click on that button, you are going to see something super familiar if you ever created and used data in Power BI. Have a look at here. It's called Power Query. As I said, it's Power Query Online. You have heaps of options, lots and lots of connectors already in the online interface. You can see some of them. I would say for the time being, it's about 60 to 70% coverage from Power BI Desktop. So you probably won't be able to find every single one of them. But I reckon the most important ones are already there. Some niche connectors, maybe not here, but the most important ones are going to be there. So we're going to start with the SharePoint folder. I click on that, and I'm just going to copy this really quickly. And I'm already logged in. Click on next. So what we are going to start with, we're going to log into a SharePoint or OneDrive folder, and we're going to combine the data files. Now, obviously, in this example, let me just close or minimize the navigation pane. In this example, I have my full OneDrive folder here, so I have to filter some records out. Let's just go with like this. But in the project that we obviously had a dedicated location just for the data that we wanted to work with. And I'm only going to use the data files for the time being. Data. And as you can see, we have a similar experience, what we normally get in Power Query. But there's one feature that I love very, very much about Power Query Online or Dataflows. Have a look at this diagram view. If you use Alteryx or some other transformation tools, dedicated transformation tools, you're probably familiar with something like this. It's a visual representation of what happened with your query. It's really handy. It's a summary of all the steps, and obviously we can read all the query steps here, but it's just super duper handy, I think. Let's just combine these files. And all of this, everything that you see right now is happening in the cloud. So I cannot show it, but right now I logged in from a Surface 2. I think it's either a Surface 1 or a Surface 2 laptop. So I don't really have to worry about having a super, super beefy machine because it's happening in the cloud. With all the benefits, and obviously if the cloud is super busy, then we're going to have some issues, but I wouldn't consider that as a major constraint. We are combining files, and just with Power Query in Power BI Desktop, you get a very, very, very similar experience. We are doing all the steps. We can change file types, combining them, and once again, when we talk about data flows, most of the time, it's essentially just Power Query Online. It's really easy to demystify data flows if you start talking about it as Power Query Online. So you can see even in the background that some funky stuff is happening, or the transformation, or the combining files is happening right now. And we get a little bit of this diagram view. Once again, I really enjoy that. And I think probably someone just unmuted themselves. So if you have a question, please fire away.
I think it was more by accident of someone new in the group.
That's
all are mute right now.
Yeah, I just muted them because I think there was no question. I just joined.
That's all right. That's all right. We can even rename our query. So as you can see, I just renamed this to data, and have a look at all the steps that we have here, starting from a sample file, going through all the regular bits and pieces. But we have this beautiful diagram view. Everything that happened to our query is visible. Really high level summary of what has happened before. I absolutely love this feature. And once again, if we are talking about business users, not IT professionals, it's a super great way of getting them excited about data and data transformation, all of that. So let's just say that we combine the data set, and we don't really need the source name. So I'm just going to remove this, because the source name, when it comes to business users, doesn't really mean anything. They don't really care about them. They wanted to just see details based on products, based on customers. So this is going to be our fact table. You can see we have a sold to ID or a customer ID. We have an item ID, a quantity sold, and the date. Once again, super simple, really, really easy data. This is going to be our fact table. Now, let me really quickly import a customer and a product dimension tables as well. If I click on Get Data, Excel Workbook, and now we can once again go into a OneDrive folder, start browsing, and once we are in that OneDrive folder, I can go into Dataflow files, theme tables, and let's just start with the customer table. Really quickly getting that. And once again, the whole experience, so we started with a folder. Now we are connecting to a single Excel workbook in a OneDrive location. But once again, it could be even a local drive. It is possible, but I'm just going to show you a solution for an absolute cloud-based report. Let's get that information here. Let's rename this to customer. You can see all of those steps, the applied steps, just like in Power BI Desktop. It is automatically created a promoted header and the changed column type step, just like we would normally get that in Power BI Desktop. And now I have my customers table with all the customer ID and all the details, bits and pieces for this dummy data. And let's get the product details as well. Once again, it's going to be an Excel workbook. It's going to be placed in the OneDrive folder. Dataflow, theme tables, and now get the product. Next. And let's grab this one. And once we grab that sheet from that Excel file, we are going to have a data table, which is the combined query with all the transactional details. And we're going to have a customer or customers and a product mapping table or dimension tables. Once again, all the bits and pieces that you would normally get in Power BI Desktop when you import data, you get the same stuff here. I'm just going to rename this as product, and we have all the details here. And once again, in the diagram view, something that you cannot find right now in Power BI Desktop, you get a little bit of summary of what has happened to your queries, the transformation steps, and all of that bits and pieces. Now let's just save and close this. Essentially, I'm going to assume that we are done with the transformation. We combined files for the data, so the fact table. We imported the customer product table. We cleansed that information. So now we can finish the, in a sense, the authoring of the data flows. It's already the steps that we wanted to apply to the data, to the raw data are there. And once you do that and click on save, you're going to get a pop-up screen to name your data flow. So I'm just going to call it a Berlin Power BI demo. Obviously, I would suggest giving them a proper name and also a really good description. We are talking about reusing data. We're talking about reusing clean data. It's really important to make sure that you give a description to those data flows that makes sense to you, that makes sense to the whole business. That's the purpose. So I'm just going to say test. Yes, I can do that. Right now, we all know what we're going to do. So the next step is essentially refreshing the data flow. Now think about the Power Query, what it does in Power BI Desktop is helping to inject data in a sense. Once again, I'm not an IT professional. Inject data into Power BI Desktop and the way how you want to transform that data. So compared to Excel, you don't have to do all the VLOOKUPs, you don't have to do all the formatting options. You get data in a specific file, in a specific way. You teach Power BI once or Power Query once how to transform that data into a more reasonable format. And it is going to do that every single time to that raw data. So now we have this data flow. You can see that it's refreshing now. So it's just getting the data. But what can you do with that? As I said, you can use that Power BI data flow as a source in your report. So let me just open this report where we're going to have lots of issues. I can see Teams blinking. Does that mean that someone raised their hands? Ben, if you can help me out on that.
No, I think it was just a joining of.
Oh, okay, cool.
People. I don't see anything. I'll keep an eye on it, I promise.
Thank you. Thank you.
As I write down all my questions for later.
That's all right. That's all right. So here we have this Power BI report that I created for this demo. But essentially, I removed all the data, all the connections. So think about that having a blank canvas, but obviously it's not a blank canvas anymore. Hopefully, if I do the right thing, all of those ugly X's are going to disappear. So in Power BI Desktop, we click on Get Data, and we either select Data Flows here. I would suggest every single one of you to do that. Or if we click on More, we have the option to search for that data flow connector. But keep an eye on this one, because we have two different options. Power BI Data Flows, which is a legacy connector type, or Data Flows. Now, this is the Power Platform connector, which Microsoft is going to enhance work on, while the Power BI Data Flows connector, the legacy, which has the legacy name in it, to the best of my knowledge, it's still going to work, probably even in our lifetime, but Microsoft is not going to work on improving that connector type. So I would always recommend using Dataflows as Power Platform Dataflows. So I'm just going to click on Connect. And once we have the pop-up window coming up, I head into Workspaces. Then it was Dataflow 101. Dataflow 101. Berlin. And now we have customer, data, and product. I'm just going to select all three of them. And before I do anything else, I'm going to pause here for a second, because imagine that you are a business analyst. You're doing your daily job, creating reports, updating, refreshing, working with data, massaging data, and all of that. When you log into Power BI Desktop, you connect to a source. I guarantee that 95% of the time, you select the source, you select the database, you select an Excel file, you select whatever connection you might have, and you're immediately going to click on Transform Data. We never, ever, or hardly ever, I should rather say, have clean data in the first place. If you use Dataflows, you already cleanse that data. You already have a clean data source to use. You no longer need to set up data types. You no longer need to remove or add columns. Finally, you are and your users are in a position to select the tables that they want and just click on that shiny, no longer yellow, shiny green probably. I'm going to call it green button that says load. Once again, the best thing about Dataflows is that the data that your users are going to use already cleansed. It's already in a shape, in the format that they're going to like, their reporting going to love, and you can be 100% sure that every single time when they connect to the data flow, essentially the data itself, they're going to get the most recent data. You don't have to worry about that they're going to miss something, miss a folder, miss a file, or anything like that. It is going to be cleansed data, and that's super duper important. If you're only going to remember one thing about Dataflow, please remember data reusability. That's the key. In my view, in my personal view, Dataflow is all about single source of truth and data reusability. So we already have the customer, data, and the product. One thing that we still have to do is heading over to the model view, and let me just really quickly put all of this here. So we still have to do some sort of a data modeling, if I may say that. Let's connect date to date, customer to sold to ID, and to product ID to item ID. And once we have all of that, we can write our measures. Let me just really quickly fix that. Right. And the sales is going to be just really quickly a quantity sold. So now I can only hope that if I remove these bad boys and put the cells back in, we are going to have a relatively basic model and essentially a super simple data. this is not the best data visit I have ever done, but for the presentation purposes, it is going to be enough. So we have created a report. So once again, let's just pause here and think about what we've done so far. We use data, we used raw data, we cleansed that using Power Query Online or Dataflows, then used Dataflow as a source in our reporting and created a report super easily. Now we can publish this. And there is a reason why you have the last date here at the top right corner. Yes, let's save it. And I'm going to publish this Dataflow 101. I'm going to publish this report to Dataflow 101. So we are at the stage that, let's say that you as a report developer created the report, your users are happy with that, and you publish the report. They come here. I hope I published it to the right workspace. Yes. So they log into the report, they see what you created for them, they're pleased, they're super happy, this is exactly what they needed. But here comes the next month. They receive the data, or you or the company received the data, and that's the next powerful bit of Dataflows. You as a report developer no longer need to click buttons to refresh reports. Let me just show you what I mean by that. I go back to my OneDrive folder. I'm going to place this file into the same folder where we use to combine the data from. So Dataflow files, data files, and let's just move here. Come here, data files. And we have the new month, the new data in the same folder. We are essentially mimicking a month end. We are mimicking new files received by us. Your users can get that data and just drag and drop to the dedicated folder. Or if you are familiar with Power Automate, you can automate that process. To a shared email, you receive the files, you automatically save the attachment, and then you file or archive the email itself. But I digress. So essentially, we have a new month with new details, new numbers. Let's just see that next month, April 2022. We have new sold to IDs, quantities, and all of that. You can see that, once again, super simple, but we have some data. Now we head back to our workspace, the Dataflow 101 workspace. And we refresh the Dataflow itself. Now, the good thing about Dataflows, if you click on refresh history, you are going to see, just like you see in a data set, what happened, when was the last time we refreshed it, and how long it took to actually refresh that data flow. You also, just like with data sets, you can download the details. So if something goes pear-shaped, you can easily identify the issues. You can easily find a solution. And for me personally, most of the time it's about data types. If I mess up something, let's say a field is no longer a number field or no longer just a text, that's usually my fault. That's when I realize that they told me and I forget to change that. So you're clicking on refreshing the data flow. And once the data flow is refreshed, once again, I don't really have too much data, so hopefully it shouldn't take more than a minute and a half. We will be able to refresh the data set without opening the reporting Power BI desktop. Now, before I do that, let me just super quickly check the credentials here. Beautiful. So you can see that in the data set itself, I have Power Platform Dataflows. And if I did everything right, And now it's seemingly beautiful. I just refresh this. So I can refresh the data set as well. And I probably missed something. Let's do it again. This is the beauty of live demo. So let's just go into the old file, and I'm going to cheat a little bit. So I'm just going to refresh the report in Power BI Desktop. Essentially, I don't really want to spend too much time on figuring out what went wrong. The credentials could be wrong or something like that. But essentially, I'm refreshing the report right now in Desktop and just connecting to the Dataflow again, getting the data from the Power Platform Dataflows, from the Dataflow that we have created. And as I said, I mimicked a month-end, new data came in. And have a look at that. Immediately, that card is now showing us the end of April. And if you were probably quick enough, you saw these company names or customer names have changed as well. And all of that could happen in the cloud without you needing to open Power BI Desktop, without you needing to wait for that refresh. And once we are talking about a little bit larger data sets than this dummy data set, a refresh could take some time, even with incremental refresh. But once again, just you clicking a button. Is it really a good way of spending your time just refreshing reports, creating reports, when your users could potentially do all of that? And that's once again where I really want you to think about data flows. They can save a lot of time for you as a report creator and put some responsibility in a sense as well to your business users. If they tell you that they really so desperately need that report, and the only thing that they need to do is copy paste the file to a OneDrive folder or drag and drop files from the location, maybe save it to a network drive, it's not rocket science. They should be able to do that. And once they do that, it's up to them to click on the button. It's also about BI maturity in that sense for the whole company. If a report is super important, show me. Show me that you, as a user of that report, care about the details. And now heading back to this PPT for a little bit of a summary, if I may. So as you saw, and as we talked about, Dataflows can help with reusing data. And once again, it's not just any kind of data. We're talking about clean data, data that your business users no longer need to transform. They can click on the shiny load button. It's also about sharing within the organizations or within the organization. It's not just you as a report creator, not just the BI team, the analyst team. Anyone can access that data. You can help the BI maturity of your company, sharing the cleansed data that people can easily use and reuse. You can also certify and promote data flows. However, I think there is a little bit of bug there because obviously data flow is not like a data set, so it doesn't have its own security settings. And right now, the UI of this whole endorsing a data flow is a little bit misleading, but technically you can certify or promote a data flow. It can also help to speed up the report refresh. Let's say that you still cannot hand over this to your business users because that's how the GM, the CEO, or just the business is done. Using a more advanced connector, as I said, the Power Platform connector, rather than connecting hundreds and thousands of Excel files, combining from a network folder, you let that happen overnight automatically, and you just refresh the report using the Power Platform Dataflow connector, it will save you time, significant time to actually use the Power Platform Dataflow connector. It can also help you with automating the whole reporting process. As you just saw that, as I said, it's a business-driven ETL. You don't have to work in the IT. You don't have to push everything to SQL. And if you are talking about a small set of data, different sources, different format, every single time when you get new data, IT people are going to refuse to work with that data. But you have the business knowledge. You know what the business really wants, what they like, and how they want that data to be presented. You can also use that, as I was just showing that, to hand over complete business reports. And your business users are going to own those reports. I cannot tell you how much that team who was involved with that little project that I mentioned, how much they improved their data skills. And I'm talking about salespeople who never ever been responsible to work with data, let alone raw data. And they finally understood why it takes so much time to refresh a report, for example, or create a report. So it's really, really handy. And the last point is, you are not a report creator factory. You are paid to analyze data. And I think that's where lots of businesses are losing money. They are looking at the analyst, business, commercial, financial, doesn't matter what sort of analyst you are. They are looking at those analysts and expect them to clean the data, to clean them manually. And that's where they lose business, and that's where they lose a lot in the BI space. So before we head over to the Q&A, let me just finish with a quote from Benjamin Franklin. And this is something that I really like. Tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. With Dataflows, I can tell you, you can involve your business partners, you can involve your stakeholders, you can involve the whole organization, and they are going to learn about data. Not just Power BI, but they are going to learn lots of great concepts about data and understand how can they use that data more efficiently, and how can they change from a just use that data type of company to an actual data-driven company. So that's all I planned for today as a Dataflow 101 or a Dataflow intro. I really hope that you liked that. As I promised, I only had like 7 or 8 slides in PowerPoint. And now it's open for Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. I try my very best to answer as detailed as I can. And most importantly, don't forget to follow me on all the socials. You can find me under Bilingual Analytics on YouTube, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So yeah, fire away any questions you have.
I can say I've written down a few questions, but I'll wait in turn for others if they have their questions first. Or I can also get the ball rolling and ask a question, see what happens.
Yeah, so as we are missing the chat, so everyone is free to unmute yourself and just ask, or maybe use the raise the hand if it's easier for you. Yeah, but
I'll open one of my questions, and then if people want to follow on, then do so. I mean, I wrote down lots of questions, but the first one says, is it possible also to do the entire process, therefore, without having a PBIX, as in also actually build the report, like to take that data flow and actually write my DAX and everything else as a purely online experience?
I would say technically yes.
Mm-hmm.
From my experience, you don't want to do that. Power BI
Okay.
Desktop is just still a million times better experience than actually authoring reports on Power BI service. You can do that, like from a feasibility perspective, you can do that, but it's not there. We can see that Microsoft is pushing really hard in the whole create everything in the cloud. We are going to take care of the hardware part of that whole report creation process. But for the time being, just like with Dataflows, you have lots of connectors, but it's still not exactly the same as what you have in desktop. It's getting close, but still not exactly the same.
I ask primarily because I get quite often questions from Mac users about how to use Power BI Desktop. And my first response is, get a real computer. But if you could do everything online, then of course that would really smooth that process over. But okay, it's interesting to know.
So funny you said that, because actually I have a Mac, and
oh no, I've offended you.
not at all. It's only for fun purposes, not for work. Browsing the web and stuff like that, it's amazing. But on a more serious note, if someone has a Mac, I would suggest starting with Dataflow. It's a much better experience in my view, at least on a MacBook Air. My MacBook Pro can handle really good volume of data, but it's not the cheapest Mac, obviously. And it has lots of RAM, so it doesn't really mind parallels or any VMs for that matter. But yes, I would strongly recommend understanding and getting familiar with the Dataflows if you have a Mac. It's just a better experience after all.
Good. And data marts, of course, as well, right?
Yes.
So data marts, you have, I think always when you want to create a data flow, it prompts you to, hey, don't you want to do a data mart instead of a data flow, which is always why I don't really understand the question, because it's very different. So when I want to create a data flow, it's a different purpose than a data mart, but that would be also an alternative for
is it data mart premium?
I think so.
Premium per user, but
premium per user, yeah.
Okay,
that PPU, yeah.
That's probably why they push it.
Mac users can afford this.
Yes,
okay.
But once again, that's a really good point, because what I see, data marts potentially more for the technical folks.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it.
But there you could do the report creation as well through it. I think that's what Microsoft wants to achieve at some point. It's not there yet. Also there if you come from Power BI Desktop and you create a template file there, something like that, that's way better than a data mart. But in the future, it could be a real alternative. So
yes,
I actually really enjoyed the use case that you gave in the presentation, because I've often thought about data flows. If I'm working at a company who've got like a really advanced and really mature data warehousing system and connecting to all this stuff that's pre-prepared for me, what do I need a data flow for? But I would like a use case, because there are always the Excel files, right? It doesn't matter where you are, how amazing. And the fact that you use that as an example, especially, I've been delivered this data. Where do I store it? Well, you store it here in this OneDrive, and it automatically updates. For me, really cleared up quite a big question that I've had hanging over my head for quite a long time. So very cool. I like that a lot. I'm going to start using that.
That's exactly how I started. I was like, do I really need this? Is it something that's going to help me? We have good enterprise data, obviously, in SQL. So that's like cool. All the internal data, everything that we have sits in SQL. All the data that comes from Salesforce.com, so external tools as well, goes into SQL. Beautiful. But what happens with those that we receive from outside of our little ecosystem or data ecosystem that we treasure?
Yeah, very nice. Very cool. Can you, sorry, I'm just keep going with questions. Again, anyone who wants to ask questions, feel free to do so. Interrupt me. Tell me to shut up. It's fine. Can you composite model with Dataflows? Can you connect to multiple?
That's a really good question. Technically, I think you can. I've never really tried. I know I could be wrong here. So if anyone else knows differently, I know that you can do live connect, so like DQ. But honestly speaking, in my view, once again, it could be just me. The place for Dataflows are more, from my perspective, once again, that's my opinion, geared towards citizen developers, towards business users. Do you really want to start getting confused with composite models? Do you really need DQ?
Yeah.
Probably not. We don't really have that much data. And once the data gets to that volume where it's big data or bigger data, that would be a really good argument and a point to the IT team that, hey, we need to scale this. We no longer can afford to have this data in a OneDrive folder. We no longer have this data in SharePoint or network drives. Let's talk about how to get that data through the proper channels, how to push that into a proper data warehouse.
Interesting. True.
And
Good point.
However, it's still possible to import more than one data flow into one PBX file. So if you want to combine something like a company-wide calendar and the products and sales Excel, you can do it.
So that's Arthur. That's once again a really good point. So if you have a look, one of the many things that I like to tell people is a great example of a Power BI data flow is a standard calendar.
That's so
if your company has a standard calendar, financial calendar, whatever, you can see I have a regular calendar and a financial calendar. It's a perfect example to start with a data flow. People no longer need to create their own calendars. They can just very simply import the standardized calendar. And if we are talking about logistics, for example, many logistics companies are not interested in month and stuff like that. They talk about quarters, and they use the 4-5-4 or 4-4-5 weeks quarter. And that's how you get every single year the same number of weeks. If you ever worked with week numbering in Power BI or any BI tool, it's a massive pain in the bum. But that's the way how a logistics reports or the logistics department usually fix that. Having a 4-5-4 or 4-4-5. I never worked for logistics. So I'm just I had 1 or 2 reports where I learned that. But essentially, that's how you can solve that problem of having the same week numbering in every single year. Doesn't matter if it's a leap year or not. So
very cool.
Helpful. But Arthur, really good point. Calendars, perfect start.
I have one final question written down. I'm sorry, mate. I've just been typing as you're talking. If I have a report that I've created in my, as I call it, PBIX, which annoys some people, but for me it's a PBIX, and I want to take what I've done in Power Query, is there a fast way to get it from my PBIX into a data flow? Or do I have to? Okay.
Copy paste. There are a couple of options, but what I found that the quickest way, you can actually
there is also an external tool which is published to Dataflow, but you still have to use the bash for this. So I instead also use copy paste.
Yes,
that's pretty cool.
So once you are in a Dataflow, you can, just like in Power Query, you can create a blank query. And let's do this.
Oh, that's very cool.
I hope I clicked on the right button. And essentially, you just open up Power BI Desktop. All the business logic that you implemented, and you copy paste it to blank query. And Bob's your uncle.
Nice. So it's just like how it works between Excel and Power BI, essentially. Copy it, paste it, it's done.
Absolutely. Exactly the same stuff.
Beautiful stuff, man.
One thing to keep. Go ahead. Sorry, Arthur.
No. I think you may say the same.
One thing to keep in mind that there's only a 99.9% coverage between Power Query and Power Query Online. The good thing is that if something is not exactly the same, it's either auto-corrected. So when you copy-paste, you hit OK, it goes through that schema, validation, and all of that bits. It is going to change that for you or suggest that you should change that line to something else.
Okay.
And I think I only saw one example online where one line of code was developed in Power Query Desktop, but it's not available in Power Query Online. You're probably not going to hit that, I reckon. But yeah, you just never know.
That's very cool. I mean, I love Power Query. Sorry, please, Arthur.
There are some features that are premium only. I think in Dataflows, like the combining of tables, but it's not really premium only. But if you combine and then disable the loading of the source, then it's not premium. But if you forget to disable this in Power BI Desktop, then it's premium. So sometimes when you have, so I use sometimes like different web APIs and combine them a lot. And this is the point where sometimes I need to think differently using all the joins. But it's also a rare stuff. But
merge and append those two are really good example, and that's where I was saying I don't really understand why. Maybe because it's a really expensive calculation if you think about that, merging or appending lots and lots of queries. But if I just merge, and let's do merge as new, so using Sol2 and do a customer and customer ID, and let's do an OK. So once you do a merge, append, and some of the AI stuff as well, obviously AI is going to be expensive. But that merge, as you can see, we have that little what's that, lightning? So it's a computed table, and it is possible to do that. But as Arthur was saying, you just have to disable the load of the original queries, and that's it. And it's no longer computed. So if I disable, and I think I used customers, right? So once again, right click, disable.
But if you duplicate this, it will still work if you need the customer tables, for example.
That's interesting.
But have a look at this. Just as we discussed, we disabled the load of those two, and now the merged query is no longer a computed table.
Cool. That's really interesting. I played around with them a while ago, and then I stopped. And I think I have this sports data that I use, and I think in the sports data, Roland's still there.
Roland?
Yeah, still there.
Yes.
He's like, he's left. No, I'm done. After my presentation. I think I was using a parameter and an API to loop through multiple variables or something, and I think I can't remember if that was giving me a premium thing or something. I can't remember, so I'll have to re-explore. But it's certainly a very interesting thing. And to be honest, at the very basic minimum, I love Power Query, and to me, to repeat myself quite often, but for me, the Power Query is what puts the power into Power BI. You know, it's a fantastic thing, but I get jealous of how it just looks online. It just looks so much better. The icons look great, and it's funny what you mentioned about Alteryx, by the way, because as soon as you open it, I was like, Alteryx. You know, it was just that this flow. It just looks very clean, and it's a beautiful thing, truly.
And imagine
also why
there's
sorry.
Imagine how much money your company can save if the only reason why they kept Alteryx is to have that little diagram view on the top, because Power Query can do a lot. So.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
There was even, I think it was even Marco Russo, he said once that for DAX, we have so many tools to really improve workflows, to improve working with DAX, like Tabular Editor and DAX Studio. Power Query, on the other hand, there's no really a need for an external tool because the tool itself is already quite good. There are some things where you say like, okay, could improve that, but Power Query is really already, as it comes out of the box, is very perfect is a good word, but it's very, very, very good already.
It's a much more complete tool, isn't it?
Yeah,
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but with Dux you have this just the little window, the little line there.
It's a really good
point.
point.
As soon as you do like start working with tabular editor, you think like, okay.
Yeah.
I think it's all about lowering the barrier of entry. Just helping the Excel folks to get familiar. Oh, that's my formula bar, or formula bar. That's great. I love it.
Yeah. But it's also, as you said in your talk, when some people really start working with Power Query, I mean, you can do so much stuff without coding, and you have success, right? You just do stuff where I had this in my company where people in the past did stuff with VBA in Excel. Yeah. And then when I hear that, it's like, don't do that. Not for data preparation, at least. There are some things where you need VBA, but not for this. And then, I didn't know about Power Query. So that's also when they see this, and then how it's drag and drop, or just not really coding. And then you can still code stuff. I mean, when you like the tool and get used to it, you can do more with it, but you can already do so much with the pivot, unpivot columns, merge, append, delete columns, search for or remove duplicates and stuff.
Yep.
So that's so powerful out of the box.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But also it's a good point, because I say quite often that it surprises me how few people know about Power Query. So if through Dataflows, it's just another way of informing people what you can do, that in itself is a win, because the number of Excel trainings that you do don't even touch on Power Query. It really, really upsets me. So just to make it more visible in a different place is also a huge win. So
yeah.
Nice. It's very cool to see how easy it is.
Yeah.
But I have also some other use cases, but they're more exotic, like to buffer some web APIs. When you have to pass authentication in the code, you cannot do it in Power BI Desktop with different authentications, but the same base URL, but you can do it in two separate data flows and then merge them together.
Okay. Looks like I'm going to be sending Arthur a message about that, I think.
And but one limitation of you cannot use the incremental refresh, as far as I know, so far without premium, right?
Correct.
So you can do it with premium per user, but then it's the self-service in the organization may be a little bit limited because you cannot share it to others.
Correct. That's true. So what I like, and when our data set was a little bit funkier than the usual, I actually put a Power Automate button inside the report. And what it does, it just refreshes the data flow itself. And the whole flow, refreshing the data flow, refreshing the data set, and ending up with sending an email to the user who clicked on the button that, hey, data flow is updated, data set is updated, you're good to go, refresh the report or refresh the page or open up the report again. And it just gave them, once again, a little bit of a hand-holding exercise. They no longer need to call me. They no longer need to wait for me to send out an email. It's, once again, an automation step that you can use. And it's really handy.
That inspires another question from my side. You can connect to Power BI, of course, as you from Power BI desktop, as you showed, to a data flow. Can you do the same in Excel when you collect collect the data from?
Finally, you can.
You can do that.
We waited so long. And when I say deep in my heart, I'm still an Excel guy, very, very deep. But that's how I roll. I think I cannot even remember. The first time I used the Dataflows was 2019, I created this example at the beginning of 2021. So by that, I was getting very familiar with what you can do and how you can do that. And if I'm not mistaken, at the end of maybe Q4 in 2022, that's when Microsoft finally released the GA of getting Dataflow data into Excel. I think Q4, maybe Q3, but let's just say the second half of last year.
That's cool.
So
That's cool.
we waited a lot, but it's finally there. It's finally there.
You know, I think I might be wrong there, but what you showed at the beginning of your talk, we have this legacy data flow and the new data flows. And I think the legacy ones, they don't work in. So also if you have the Power Query and you copy that to Excel, I think it will fail. But the new ones, they work kind of seamlessly. So I think that's maybe also a reason why they keep the old, why they keep the old ones. But that was also in the past, you had to manually change the query in Excel to get it to work. Then you could kind of bypass it. But with the new ones, it's super easy.
I feel very much that I'm going to become a Dataflow person because this all sounds very interesting, and I'm going to go and do a lot of playing over the next few days. My boss is going to be saying, "Ben, what are you doing?" I'm going to be saying, "I'm playing with Dataflows. Leave me alone."
Yeah, they are really, really powerful. And once again, the main reason why I love them is because of the data reusability and the fact that you can give some data back to your business users, back to those who are going to consume your reports. And this is something absolutely unheard of in the Excel world, or before it was even possible in Excel. It's just amazing. Something that, once again, I never really assumed that I'm going to be able to do, but it's there, it's possible, and it works absolutely beautifully.
Yeah. Nice. So I quickly muted myself there because my dog's going crazy in the background. Cool. Just, is there any more questions in the chat, by the way, in case people are intimidated by us our conversation? I'll open it once more.
I've also one more use case, maybe to give the people time for some questions, if there are some. How I got started into also data flows years back, and it was a very small example, but also where data flows are really helpful. I have some scenarios where people have to enter stuff manually, and then that's used in reports, for example, budgets or something like this. And they enter it in an Excel file, for example. And if you do it in the Power BI file, PBX file as a report, and if you have people entering stuff manually, errors will happen. There's a date field and they will enter a text like unknown. And depending what the Power Query does, it will run into an error. If you have it in the PBX file, the whole report will fail, depending on how it's set up, and then it's not refreshed. If you have it in the data flow will fail, but the PBX file will still refresh completely and just grab the last kind of snapshot of the data flow that is. So the last piece might be missing of this budget, the last budget that someone entered, but the rest of the report will just update. And then you can just tell the people, hey, something failed in the data flow, please fix stuff. But the report itself is there, the numbers and stuff. So that was also for me, this is how I started with the data flows. And then, okay, you still get the error in the data flow, but the report itself works fine. And if you have it all in the file, you have to do it manually, go in the file, fix it.
I like to call this the black sheep example.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. The second or third use case and in a sense, best practice would be separating any of those data sets from your regular data flow. So let's say that you have in a single data flow all about the same topic or the same report, and you have 6 different data sources. 5 of them are going to be, in a sense, static or reliable, and then you're going to have the black sheep. As you said, really, really nicely put it together. The manual interaction with that, or just not a reliable source. We all know the reliable sources. And
basically
and
all
like
external sources.
Yes. And that's it. Even at that stage, as you said, the data flow will fail, but then you can help as a creator or the super user to fix that, but the report is not going to produce those X's or just fail, crack under the load, because you are going to have last day, last month's data still in ADSL in the storage, but the transformation steps are going to fail for the newest data. So really good use case.
That's cool. I like it. If I'm connecting to SharePoint, for example, how does it work with authentication? Because I'm asking specifically because perhaps it would help me get around this thing with the OAuth 2, which always frustrates me, where the authentication will every 2 weeks or something kind of just disappear and you've got to re-authenticate. Does this also happen with Dataflows, or is there a different method for authenticating there?
Not sure that I understand the question.
Okay.
You mean that you have to renew your passwords every single time?
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, it is a bit out there as a question, so I'm sorry for that. But basically, because we're talking about connecting to like OneDrive, SharePoint, that sort of thing, and experience being currently when I'm doing my standard Power Query in my PBX, I publish my data set, and then when I'm connecting through a gateway, for example, in the gateway to authenticate, you don't need to use the gateway, but rather you need to use your Microsoft OAuth 2 thing, which will every 2 weeks roughly need to be re-authenticated. I don't know. I was wondering if with Dataflows that doesn't exist. For example, if Dataflows you have a different method of authentication, and perhaps it would help get around that problem.
That's a good question, because we had the 90 days, so like 3 months schedule.
Yeah.
And I never really came across any issues of going back to Dataflow to adjust the credentials.
Okay. It's interesting.
Yeah, but I think it might be different. And I know what you mean, Ben. If the Dataflow is also a Microsoft artifact, so to connect to a Dataflow, you also need all this OAuth2 stuff. You don't have a principal user.
Yeah.
But if you stay in your own workspace, it doesn't matter actually, because you still, if you connect to the Power BI service, you're connected. It should be refreshed. So in my personal data flows, this is no problem. But if you want to use it as a part of a bigger infrastructure, then you still have to, at some point, if you don't use a principal user and create an Azure app for this, which is quite a heavy thing. I cannot do this either because I don't have the rights in our environment. This is something also quite annoying. But yes, it's still the same. It's a.
I think I got the question. So hold on, because that's a massive limitation in. Now we are no longer in the 101 space, but that's a massive, in my view, once again, in my view, it's a massive limitation in Dataflow, but Microsoft is working on this. So essentially, a Dataflow can only have one owner. So imagine that you are part of a central BI team, 5, 10 people, doesn't matter. Every single one of you are experts. Only one of you can make changes to that Dataflow.
But you can export this as a JSON and import this again with all the same name.
Yes, you can do a lot of funky stuff, and
this is how I do this.
So what I did, hold on 1 second. So if I remember well, I also have a video about how to do all of that. I hate this new here.
That's interesting.
How to work. That's one. How to collaborate or co-author a Power BI data flow. So you can technically do a lot of good stuff, exporting JSON, taking over. So you can take ownership from one user to another. So this is the video. I don't want to. Yep, obviously ads, but essentially how to collaborate or co-author Power BI data flows. Essentially, a user can take over, it has to be an admin, I think admin rights in the workspace to take over, and then they can make all the changes and all the bits and pieces. But for the time being, only one user can make any changes. And that's, once we are talking about a larger scale, medium or large scale data flow or BI operation, that's a massive limitation.
It's on the one side, you don't want the business users sometimes to change everything, so it might quite be to keep it safe. But if you collaborate, I know this from daily work. Export JSON, import again with another name or another workspace and change it, but you still have to talk to
and
each
then you
other,
can
not to
copy paste the M code, so you can do all of that in. But yeah, it's. Once again, would you call it a best practice?
No.
It's a practice.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. I've gone through my plethora of questions, so I'm questioned out.
I have one more, but it's a real question, because sometimes I have like problems because maybe the failure you have with refreshing was also one of this. Then there is we cannot combine two data sets, and this is sometimes because of the privacy levels when you use Dataflow and something else. But for me it's not. I cannot reproduce this well. And this is sometimes a problem. Sometimes it works, sometimes not. Maybe it depends on, I don't know, some settings of the data sources itself, and it does not happen so often that I can figure it out. So it's just interesting if you ever had such problems with the privacy levels and refreshing.
So what I found, and we can give it a try. I'm not 100% sure that this is going to be the issue, but in some cases, even though that I'm logged in, I'm authorized, I have all the credentials, all the bits and pieces, I still need to go into the dataset, log in, hit refresh, and let me just try and have a look if now the dataset is going to refresh. There you go. So essentially, I did nothing else. So even in we have a recording, so we can go back and have a look. But if we click on the three dots, settings, and data source credentials, so usually if something is not right, you have a little, I think, exclamation mark or something indicating that, hey, you need to fix this. We had nothing, so seemingly it was all fine. Now you saw I just logged back in, clicked on edit credentials, logged in again with the same user, and now it went through. So hopefully if I go into my report and wait for it to refresh, there you go, I have the last date. So if you remember, I published this with the end of March. Now it should all work fine. But once again, it's most of the time, that's what I see, is that going into the data set that's using the data, consuming the data flow, heading into settings, and under the data source credentials, just log in again. It's like a turn it off and back on again, right? That's classic IT solution, right?
Exactly.
Solves 99% of issues.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Any last questions, comments, anything else? I think for who are still here, we're still planning to have some next talks with Imke Feldman. I think it's not announced yet.
Will be announced next week, ideally. Yeah.
Okay, so keep tuned for the one who stayed the overtime and the Q&A, and The other ones will get to know from Meetup and LinkedIn, and now also we are on Twitter because we have Ben as a co-organizer.
I'll have to be more active, but yes, I'll be posting stuff on Twitter and reminders and all that kind of stuff for sure. Yeah. Sorry one more time about the chat. I'll get that right for next time, or maybe Christoph will be organizing that one, so it'll be right anyway. But yeah, thanks for joining, everyone.
It worked.
It worked.
And it was a great talk. Thanks again.
Thanks to everyone.
It was very
Thanks
cool.
to
Thanks so
Roland.
much, Roland.
Really cool.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
To Down Under.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. See you guys.
Cool.
Yep.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care. Next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.